Sergeant, retired Carl Jeff Clark. Well, Jeff, here we are. After pestering you for almost a year, we finally are able to perform this time-honored retirement ceremony to honor not only you and your service and your sacrifice to our great country, but also the sacrifice made by your wife and your children. You certainly didn't make it easy. I count no less than half a dozen closed-door discussions about how we wanted to properly recognize you for your more than 36 years of service. With humility and your signature sigh, you explained that you didn't want a formal ceremony, that maybe a cookout at lunch would be a better option. Well, it looks like we met in the middle with a bit of a compromise. We had a flight lunch and a formal ceremony for some much-deserved recognition and an accomplished career. I first met Jeff in 2008, and there's a short but funny story. I'm gonna relay this, and some of you have heard this story. So, I had interviewed for the client systems position here. I was coming out of maintenance, interviewed for client systems position here in COM, and the interview went well and everything like that. Well, Major Adamitis called me and said, we need you to come up, we want to discuss the interview. I said, great. So I come up to COM, I'm standing outside this front door, and I look in, and there's then Major Adamitis and then Master Sergeant Todd Sargent with Jeff, this guy in civilian clothes who I had no idea who he was. And they're all laughing and yucking it up and shaking hands and backslapping. And then they look at Jeff and they both say, all right, great, we'll see you Monday. I know I'm there to get a notification on the interview about whether or not I got the job. And my first thought was, wow, these two are savage. I can't believe they just did this in front of me. Because I'm thinking Jeff's got the job, right? So he leaves, and I just walked in. I'm totally defeated, and it was that point that Colonel Adamitis offered me the position, and it was funny too, because as Jeff's leaving, he's like, "Oh, hey, Jeff Clark, how you doing?" And I'm like, "You son of a..." So, anyways, but that was my short and somewhat funny story. Fast forward 2 years after coming to plans, I had the opportunity to work with a guy that has forgotten more about infrastructure and how to build and maintain it than most people will ever learn. Although I knew about electrons and lasers and how made IT systems communicate and function, I was lacking in the knowledge and how they get from point A to point B. Jeff was the encyclopedia, the Wikipedia, and the Google for all the information on that. His vast knowledge and experience with the duties of CCB, or back then it was a STEM, paid dividends to our organization and the wing. He was able to review plans and drawings of construction projects and quickly identify both aspects that were not correct and those that would be considered best practice. The IT projects that he played a key role in, and these are just a few of them, I'm sure I've forgotten a few of them. MQ9 operations at Fort Drum. He extended the Fort Drum outside plant to connect the ground data terminals for line of sight flying, basically standing up the LRE, the launch and recovery element that we had at Fort Drum, and network connectivity for 2 brand new hangars and the work center space associated with those hangars at Fort Drum as well. Formal training unit right down here in building 641. Not only did it once, but twice. Because the first time wasn't good enough, so they had that on. No, in all honesty, that was to ramp up more production. MQ9 antenna farm out behind building 646. Jeff was probably the biggest key player on that. It brought in a lot of innovation, enabled maintenance to maintain their own connections between the GDTs and the GCSs, resulting in both ISP, or inside plant and outside plant connectivity, for 5 ground data terminals and 1 satellite Earth terminal subsystem, or SETS, the big satellite dish you guys see out there. He also set up a primary and redundant 72-strand fiber path from building 641 to building 646, and I believe the one that loops around almost $500,000, right?
Yes.
Thereabouts? Okay. Also, as mentioned in this MSM, the installation notification and warning system, the SOC 1.0 weapon system upgrade that we're currently going through now, to include the original SOC, the remodel of building 131 and the construction of the skiff in building 130 to modify for the 152's mission change, extension of base infrastructure to the former Columbia College, as well as the Army down the east end of the base, renovation of building 800 for the 274th ASOS, emergency recovery of base infrastructure after catastrophic cable cut. He assisted the infrastructure guys, Nick and Mark, in the rerouting all the data traffic over legacy infrastructure to keep our mission moving, and he drafted a state. This was phenomenal. So Jeff drafted a statement of work in less than 2 weeks. I mean, a massive statement of work for less than 2 weeks for an emergency 45-day, $500,000 contract to replace all of the fiber that was cut and torn up during that incident. So, absolute kudos to you. I have mad respect for this guy. These are just a few of the projects that Jeff had oversight of. The most significant of these accomplishments is that any other IT planner, if you go to another conflict, talk to another IT planner, they'd have to rely on their servicing SysEB to complete all these projects. Jeff leveraged his prior experience to ensure that these projects were engineered properly and that industry standards were met by contractors. I learned a lot about both ISP and OSP from Jeff Clark. I leaned on him to provide technical knowledge, facilitate accurate decision making, both at my level and above. He was always my go-to. If I had an infrastructure question, I knew that I could get an informed answer that I would understand. He had a knack for using small, single-syllable words for me.
So I know.
More importantly, I consider Jeff to be a friend. He was never afraid to speak plainly to me, offering his personal advice on professional matters and his take on my personal issues. They often came in unsolicited, and sometimes a guy needs to hear it that way, and it wasn't always comfortable, but it was always truthful and heartfelt. I could always tell when a lecture was coming, because it would always begin with the signature Jeff Clark sign. For all of that, I am eternally grateful to have him as a teammate, a wingman, and a friend. Fortunately, we're in a unique situation with Jeff's retirement. This is simply his military retirement. I cannot stress enough the fortune that we have as an organization to keep his ability and Jeff on for as long as he decides to stay on as a Title V. When that day comes, he will leave giant shoes to be filled, as he is by far the best IT planner I have met to date. All that being said, thank you, Jeff, for everything that you've done for me, the organization, the wing, the New York Air National Guard, and the United States Air Force. And I'll see you on Monday.